Good evening, ladies and gents. This is the infamous Spot of Nerd, bringing you new content to discuss. And I apologize right out of the gate if you hear some swishing noises. That is currently the jacket that I am wearing because it's cold as balls here in the great Pacific Northwest. But it's also one of my favorite jackets because it is basically my San Diego Zoo jacket. And I thought it might be kind of time to start talking about the zoo world. It's quite the tale, shall we say. And I figured we could do, I'll just title it Zoo Life Part 1 or something like that. I don't know, maybe I'll change the title by the time I finish this podcast, but um yeah, because I think I'm also legally allowed to talk about it now. Just in case, I won't mention who I worked for, but let's just say that they are world famous in respects to the zoo world. And so yeah, I wanted to talk about it because it was the greatest job I have ever had in my entire life, but it was also horrible. And we'll go into those details maybe in the future, maybe right now, so on and so forth. Because a lot of people nowadays, you think of the zoo, you think of wildlife conservation, Steve Irwin, etc., and you think nothing but positive. And I can promise you, what you see on the outside definitely does not hold true to what goes on inside. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to focus on the negative. We're going to just be real about it when we talk about the zoo stuff because, again, the greatest passion I've ever had in my entire life was wildlife conservation. Ever since I was a kid, I wanted to be a zookeeper, and I made that dream come true. It took a lot of work, it took a lot of effort, but I am genuinely one of those people, one of those rare individuals in this world that I can say that I achieved my goal, my dream of working my dream job. Not a lot of people can say that. People are searching, they search their whole lives to find the job of their dreams, and many don't. But thankfully, I can say that I was able to. And the sad truth is, of course, that dream ended. And quite possibly was one of the worst days, most horrible days of my life because I had to walk away from that dream. It's something we'll, again, broken record, we'll go into more later, but could I always go back? I mean, maybe. But due to health and everything in between, it would be very difficult for me to go back and do just the physical demand of the job. It is not for those that are weak and or are not able to, I guess, just really be around nature and the environment and everything in between, because one minute it's the winter and it's 18 degrees, and the next minute it's summer and it's 125, and your job is outside. You are in the elements, rain, snow, sun, the whole nine yards, but you adapt. And some people can do it for their life. For me, whether it was previous jobs, I always look at when I worked at Costco or grocery stores, and I always used to push carts all the time. That, I guess that physical demand takes its toll. And, I look I think now I can talk about it because it's been long enough. You can actually look this information up, but one of the hardest things about having to leave that job was in the end I had to sue them. So, like I said, without going into too many details of who, what, when, where, just look up my name and San Diego and, you know, put two and two together for what we're talking about in terms of the zoo. But yeah, I had to sue them because essentially I had an injury that was on the job that occurred while I was clocked in and working my job. And for years, for years and years and years, I just desperately wanted help. And you've probably heard some of this through previous episodes and YouTube episodes, etc. I won't go too much into that, but for years all I wanted was help. I just wanted some medical help. That's really I needed somebody to I just needed somebody to give a shit. And I tell you what, if there is one piece of advice I can ever give anybody, regardless of what we're talking about, obviously I talk a lot about physical health and mental health. You've got to be in charge of your own health. You really, you are the one that has to do it, because I'm not saying, medical staff are not capable, but I can promise you, you are a blip on the screen. These doctors and these specialists and everybody else. I mean, again, I tip my hat to them. They are amazing people, but they're not going to think twice about you. So you have to take charge of your own health care. And the sad truth again is, not to go down that negative path, but I learned that lesson too late, I guess. As I've mentioned, I'm disabled, and if I had learned what I know now, even so much as 10 years ago, I can promise you I'd be in a far better place than I am now. So, but besides that, the zoo, working as a zookeeper, Steve Irwin, he was the crocodile hunter. He is still my greatest idol that I've ever had in my life. He is the definition, and he is proof that one man can change the world for the better. I mean, think about it. There's 8 billion people on this planet, and he woke this entire world up to wildlife conservation. I mean, just think about that. What that takes to get people to give a shit about wildlife, to give a shit about animals. I mean, of course, it's not to say they didn't before, but back in the 90s, the 80s, the 90s, nobody really paid too much attention to it. And it wasn't until you saw a show on Animal Planet called The Crocodile Hunter that really opened your eyes and made you want to care and made you fall in love. And when you fall in love, his quote, you actually want to do something about it. Personally, I think he saved the industry in terms of the zoo organizations around the world. To say the realistic fact of the matter, zoo organizations are a dying breed. They're like the malls. They are a dying breed. There is going to be an expiration date for zoos, and we'll go down that path another time, but a lot of that comes down to animal rights groups and things like that, because obviously I respect those. I mean, if you can have a respectful opinion as to not believing that animals belong in a zoo, I will respect that opinion. But if you're just going to throw, animals don't belong in zoos because it's prison, da 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 da, I just would simply encourage you to do your research, because you ask any zookeeper, any wildlife conservationist, zoos are needed so that we can educate people essentially on how to preserve these amazing species, these amazing animals. If we don't have those zoos or those organizations, you will see everything go extinct. You know, it's it's a fine line that, we've always had to walk through, specifically with this podcast and the channel that I do, because of course I have my personal opinions about it that would definitely go against the grain to the mainstream, the media, the social media, etc. But really what it comes down to is, yes, I understand why people don't want zoos, but I really hope that I can educate them as to why they are needed. And for my entire career as a zoologist, I guess as I would call myself, was just over 15 years. I started off with the cats and dogs. Started volunteering in the zoos, and eventually started getting paid for it. And it was, again, 15 of the greatest years of my life, hands down. I got to work with some of the most amazing animals and species of wildlife this world has ever seen. I got to do stuff that nobody ever will get to do. I got to do things that very few people in this world have actually in fact done. I've been elbows deep inside a giraffe's hoo-ha, pulling out a 5-foot kid because he got stuck, and we had to drag him out, covered in hoo-ha juice, just so I can make sure that this kid survives. And it's there's no words. You can't I can't put into words what that feeling is, because it's nothing short of a miracle. And of course there were times and days and things like that were difficult and challenging, but I can just tell you, I would always wake up and I never once didn't look forward to work. Now, there is a difference between enjoying your work, but also the bureaucracy. So let's be real. Going into work, I wanted to do the job. There were definitely moments I did not want to deal with the people. It was actually the zoo, in fact, that I found, to be quite frank, the evil nature behind humans, really. Um, it's one of the reasons why I am who I am today in terms of a right-wing conservative. I'm not the lunatic ones, but I'm definitely right-wing conservative, because it was the first time that I woke up was when I worked for the zoo. And I'll give you more details on that later, but the cliff notes was, when I initially started doing this job, volunteering and working, etc., I actually recorded it. Now, I'm old enough that, I did not record footage or pictures, but I made a blog. I don't even know if it was, I know, I think it got taken down. And that's the saddest truth about it, is because I wanted to share to the world this passion I had of, look at what I get to do. And there's people out there right now that have blogs that, even with today's technology, that they use their cameras, etc. But I mean, this is way in the earlier 2000s. And really what it came down to is one day one of the leadership people came to me and said, "Hey, you got to take this down." And it was at that moment, I can tell you, there's those moments in your life where you look back and you can pinpoint the exact moment that somebody destroys you. And they don't destroy you in a, you know, that's it, I'm done. But they destroy a piece of you that makes you go, okay, I now see what the world is about. And it's that cliche where how your parents, they want to raise you, hopefully they want to raise you to almost protect you and hide you away from the evils of the world, but eventually those evils do tend to slip through, and this was one of those moments. And it was heartbreaking. It was truly one of the most gut-wrenching times I've ever had, that I'm sitting down at a table, and you feel, I mean, let's be real. You always, sometimes when a manager pulls you into the office, they're going to have okay, what did I do wrong? Blah, 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 blah. But this time it was, Yeah, you know how you have a passion and a love for this job? I need you to stop telling people about it. It was soul crushing, absolutely soul crushing. So that was kind of the wake up call, I guess, into me really opening up my eyes, waking up as I've referenced to anything, politics, media, social, blah blah blah. But I kept going, because again, you don't shy away from the fact that very few people in this life get to achieve their dreams and work their dream jobs. And I could give two craps about the pay. I mean, yes, it was in California, so I was dirt poor. I had no health insurance. Every day was a risk, but I did it because I loved it. I loved every second. And working with elephants and lions and tigers and bears, oh my, yes, I went there. I would do it. I'd give up anything to go back and do it again. I really would. Um, so yeah, we'll kind of keep talking about it. I won't record too much of a long video or podcast with these, but ask me your questions. Comment. What was your favorite animal, or do you enjoy the zoo? Which zoos do you go to? Was Steve Irwin somebody a part of your life? Did you ever watch him? Um, I have pictures I can always start sharing again. I haven't really shared anything on social in quite a while in relation to the wildlife, but I could start doing that too now. But it's gosh, yeah, I'm just trying to think now. Yeah, it was like 15 years of my life was spent saving this planet's animals, saving the wildlife of this world, and I will forever be grateful for those moments. You know, uh, Even the most hilarious moments ever, and I'll give you an example. People think that there's all these special tools and equipment to do procedures on a lot of these animals, and I can tell you the truth, a lot of it is on the fly. You are making and creating machines, and you are creating techniques on the job, on the fly, to try and fix whatever might be going on. It's always the running joke was, well, how do you give an enema to a larger animal? Well, you knock it out and you stick a hose in the back door and you let gravity take its course. It's kind of one of those, I mean, just hypothetically, metaphorically, all that, but um, you did what you had to do. If you had to do a procedure on an elephant, you don't exactly walk it into the hospital. You anesthetize it. You do the procedure literally in the field, covered in God knows what, and then you go about your day. Or there's the other vice versa. You're spending 8 hours scooping shit. So yeah, you're gonna be destroying your body, but hopefully in a good way, because it makes you look ripped and beautiful. And though I am beautiful, but I was much more beautiful back then, let me tell you. I think. I don't know. You tell me. I'll send some pictures out on Instagram and you tell me what you think. But yeah, anyway, we'll dive deeper on it, because again, there was the dark side, as I would say, from the Star Wars reference, when it comes to the bureaucracy, that the sad truth is, though there are good people in these organizations, there are a lot of evil ones. And by evil, I mean people that just it's anywhere from they have zero passion behind their job, it's just job to them. They have zero care. Obviously, I've heard and I've seen stories just from my own recollection of people that harm animals while on the job, and it's a very, very sad, horrible thing, but I mean, it happens. Let's be real. But thankfully, I was never a part of it or anywhere near it. Just kind of a word of mouth type thing. And the hardest part, though, being again the politics. There's politics in every job. I never would have thought it was in the zoo world, but it definitely is in the zoo world. And I really do feel I had a lot of missed opportunities just because of, maybe some opinions I might have had. It's nothing that really involved, losing or losing the job or anything like that, but it was definitely something that kind of held me back at times just because of a viewpoint, and it was the definition of discrimination in my view. But um, again, we'll go down that path another time because the pros far outweighed the cons. It really did. The zoo, the wildlife, being a zookeeper was the greatest gift that I've ever been given. And I can promise you, hands down, if I could ever go back, I wouldn't even think twice. If I had the ability to, I would not think twice to go back. It was special. It was absolutely special. But anyway, we will leave it at that. Thank you all so much for listening and watching. Like I've said, comment, subscribe, follow, like everything you can think of with Spot of Nerd. I super appreciate it. I really, really do. We will continue this series, I guess, of the zoo world, the zoo life, in future podcasts and such. But until then, we will see you guys next time. Later, y'all.